Hey everybody, welcome to Cleartone Podcast. I'm your host, David Rodriguez, and today's special guest of the new year is Miss Erin Duke.
Well,
Erin,
that's
thanks for
me.
coming.
Yeah,
That's
thanks for
you.
having
Yep,
me.
yep, that's you. So Erin, Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
Even though this is being recorded a little bit before New Year's, but nonetheless, Happy New Year.
I've been waiting for the new year for months, so let's just start it now.
Okay, hey,
Yeah.
I'll go with it. So, new year, new questions. What for you? How did you get involved with music?
Oh gosh, so it's a long journey. As a kid, I actually took piano lessons. I remember none of it, so that was money well spent. But I remember in elementary school, our school is one of those ones where you had to play an instrument for like a grade or whatever. I really wanted to play the clarinet, and my parents were like, "No, I don't think you should because you've got asthma." And I was like, "We didn't know how that was going to work." So I actually picked the violin, and that was a special time in my life. I could rock the socks off of Vera Jacques, but that I didn't really get like into I after that point, I didn't I dropped all music for a while. But it's so dumb. I went to see a documentary with my dad, and it was called It Might Get Loud, and it's a film by Guggenheim, and it followed three guitarists, Jack White from the White Stripes, The Edge from U2, and Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin. And I remember like the gears in my head just clicked in the middle of the movie. And I remember I was sitting there, and there was a scene where The Edge was playing in this concert in, Ireland. And he walked out in the middle of the stage and he was playing. And I looked to my dad and I said, "That's going to be me one day." And I came home, and I've been playing music ever since. Like, from that day, I've been obsessed. Like, it's so bizarre that something so simple changed my life. And then, so obviously I played guitar first, and then, it was sort of spiraled after that because I was like, there's so much more to this than just one instrument. How much more can I do? But I would like rush home from school, do my homework as fast as I could just so I could practice for like 4 or 5 hours. It was just life changing. It's like an odd introduction, but it's one that I'm grateful for having because that's really what started it all.
Okay. And so, were you able to draw from your violin experience that you had to play guitar?
Not, I maybe, but I don't think so. It came in handy later because then I started to learn the upright bass or the double bass for our school's concert band because we didn't have a tuba player. I was like, oh, this is like the same as violin. I kind of remembered parts of it, but for guitar, I don't think so. It's just totally different beast, both of them. But if you ask me to play violin today, there's like no way, absolutely not. I probably couldn't even do row, row, row your boat.
Okay. So, when you were learning to play the guitar, what age were you then?
Oh, I think I was probably 11.
Okay.
So it was like 2009, 2010. I was just in the middle of middle school. My great uncle gave me one of his brother's guitars, and his brother had passed away. And we were in New Mexico at the time, and he goes, "Here, just like have a guitar if you're interested." And that was my first guitar, and now it's all beat up and everything because it's a classical guitar that I was playing Led Zeppelin on, so that didn't really, fit the bill. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's just crazy time.
Okay. And then did you play at school? Did they offer? Were you able to participate in school music during that time, or was this you were doing it on your own and you were kind of just picking it up on you
Yeah,
practicing
I
on your
mean,
own privately?
at the very beginning, I was just learning by ear, and I took a group guitar class for like 5-year-olds, but it was just we're all going to learn the same material, whether, it doesn't matter how old you are. And then the teacher of this little group class was like, "Why don't you take private lessons?" So I did. And then, but mostly it was just me at home learning stuff by ear. And I think that is so beneficial to what I do now, because I was sort of not necessarily brought up, but that was just, second nature to me, where I'm going to listen to something and I'm going to imitate it. and as a composer, as a conductor, as a musician, that's something we do so often is we imitate, or at least that's a way to learn. So that was just so instrumental, pun, to what, I would become down the line.
Okay. And so because I know you as a percussion player, so when did that happen? When did you make that journey? What's that journey look like?
So I remember I was starting high school and I was gonna join the volleyball team, and then that didn't work out. So my mom was like, "You need to do some sort of group activity," and so she made me audition for the school jazz band, and this is just like the weirdest time of my life. And I went in and I auditioned. And I was like, I brought my classical Cordoba and I was like, okay, so I can't read music, but I can play, something fancy. So I did. And the band director, who's a great friend now, he said, well, that's fine as long as you, eventually learn how to read music, we'll take you because obviously you have some sort of skill. And I never learned how to read music. So I just winged it the entire year. I'd be like, oh, I don't have my glasses. And then he'd be like, well, you better squint, or,
Yeah.
I'd play like, I got an electric guitar then, and I would just turn the amp off and just play random stuff. Cause it was embarrassing. But, I remember that year was my freshman year, and he said, uh, anybody that wants extra credit in jazz band can play in the drum line for the winter parade. And me thinking, oh geez, I'm gonna fail jazz band, like now
Right.
you don't really get the big grades for music classes. But I was like, oh, I have to do it. So then I went, and I still couldn't read music, but part of my brain understood just rhythm over like notes. So I joined and I played bass drum in the holiday parade, and then I met the guy who was doing the indoor drum line, and he goes, "Oh, well, why don't you join our winter line?" And I was like, "Oh no!" And then I went to one rehearsal, and I was like, "Oh, percussion from then on." But I played in marching band for 3 years, but I didn't do concert percussion until my senior year of high school, where um, the guy, so I said we didn't have a tuba player, so I was always playing the string bass on the tuba part. But my senior year, all of the percussionists had graduated, so it was basically me and a bunch of freshmen from like the marching band. And my band director's like, "Well, we have a tuba player now. Why don't you try playing timpani or something?" And I was like, "I don't know. That doesn't sound as fun as the string bass." And I did, and I fell in love instantly. And I made such a rash decision. Well, I was like, hey, why don't I just do this for the rest of my life? Um, but I knew I was going to study music, but I had a really hard time picking, bass, guitar, or percussion. And I had a conversation with my band director, and he goes, "You're a good bass player and a good guitarist because you're a good percussionist. You're not a good percussionist because you're a good bass player or a good guitar player." Um, so at that point, that was December before the spring where like you have to audition for colleges.
Right.
And I had made the decision at that point, I'm going to study percussion. So I spent every lunchtime, I got to school early, I stayed after late, and I taught myself how to play the marimba with one of the solos that I could use for college auditions. And I was like, at that point, I kind of figured out timpani, not so great. And I obviously knew snare drum from marching band. Um, and then I just ran with it, and then I kind of never looked back.
Okay. So and the time that you were playing this, you were still in the jazz group even when you were playing in the concert band and in the drum line?
Yeah, so the way our school worked is we didn't have like I know a lot of schools did band zero period, but our school we had two jazz bands, which were different periods, and then we had two orchestras, which were different periods, and then we had the marching band in the fall, concert band in the spring. Somewhere, I think it was my sophomore year, I decided I'm going to switch to the bass and jazz band because there's less notes to read, right? You only have to do one at a time versus like chords. And so I taught myself how to read bass clef. And So I got progressively better at that, which was pretty great because then I still got to play in college. But so I did all of that. I think, I probably could have, I could have had a lot less stress in high school if I didn't do as much music. Cause I think my senior year, I was in 4 music classes with like 0 period and all of that. So it's like, I could have been done a lot earlier if I didn't do the music, but I'm like, I felt it was so much more fulfilling to be a part of all those things than going at lunch. And I remember at the end of senior year, my friends were like, I haven't seen you since like November. And I was like, yeah, because I've been in there practicing.
Right. So when was that commitment for you? When did you decide I want to? This music is part of my life. I want to study this.
um, it must have been maybe late junior year, like after SATs, and I was trying to pick my schedule for the new year. And I was like, music theory AP kind of sounds like a good choice, especially if I want to pursue this. I think when I started high school, I had my mind set. I was like, I want to go to Stanford, but I know you need like straight A's. And, I kind of want to, I don't know if I want to be an engineer. I was getting into architectural design. I was like, that's all very brainiac-ish. But I remember I got into like honors bio my freshman year of high school, and I totally bombed it. I was like, no, this isn't for me. I'll find something else along the way. And I think the more I got into all these music classes, I was like, I think this is really where my passion's at. It was just deciding, how can I make this a reality? Obviously, it's a lot of work, and I was no stranger to practicing, but it was deciding what that's going to look like, what instrument that was. So yeah, I would say late junior year, early senior year, I was like, I want to study music, but I need to really like double down and figure out what that means for me.
What about a career? Did you have a career path?
No, not at all. I was like, let's just figure this out. I
Okay.
was thinking
Right.
everybody says, you can change your major once you start school. So I was like, if I don't like what I choose, I can always switch. Um, so career, at that point, when I decided I wanted to do percussion, I had no idea that there was so much to that. There's all the little subcategories: hand percussion, pit percussion, professional concert musician, orchestral percussion. Then there's like musical theater. There was all that stuff, and I had no idea. I was My whole thing was I knew I wanted to teach someday, but at
Okay.
that point I couldn't even understand what any of that meant. So I knew I needed a performance degree in what I wanted to teach so I could learn to teach. um, and ultimately that worked out just fine. At the time I had no career goals whatsoever. I was like, let's just see where this goes.
Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. And then what was you talked a little bit about the preparation
Mhm.
for taking the auditions to go to college. Um, you finally decided on a college of your choice that you were going to go to. What was that experience like being a percussion player and being this is something now that you said in the fall you decided you wanted to study music
Mhm.
and you were learning the marimba, right? So you got to read notes now.
Oh yeah.
And so what was, that preparation, or not that preparation, but what was your experience now going into your undergrad study and being a percussion major?
Right. I think um, it was obviously a very brash decision, and I made it really late in the process, right? Because when college apps are due like on December 1st or something like that. And
Right.
at that point, I had to decide, okay, this is what I'm going to do, percussion. And then I looked at all the requirements and I was like, oh my gosh, and I based what schools I was going to apply to on their rep list. So I didn't have to learn more than one piece per instrument, which is just like, it's like coupon shopping. You go where, you have the advantage. um,
Right.
so I picked 10 schools, which was probably way too much, but I didn't know where I wanted to go. So I realized after I did the whole audition thing, I would get to see the campus, meet the people. And then ultimately, after all of that, I picked APU. But the transition from being, a high school student to being so focused on just what you want to do. And it's so particular with music, as you have to spend all your time just music, 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 versus before it's like music on the side where it's treated like an extracurricular plus all your core material. It was a big shock. But I think I had the tools and the mentors to lead me in the right direction. All that time I spent learning how to play the marimba, it was painful, because I could barely read the notes. I didn't know. I was like Googling how to hold 4 mallets. And I was like, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I didn't even own a pair of mallets. I auditioned on the high school's mallets, which were like, geez, I don't know, 15 years old, where they just look like little troll heads because there's
Okay.
like none of the yarn is wrapped. Um, so I spent, like I said, every lunch, every day after school, I spent practicing, and I learned like a 2-minute solo. It took me like 3 months, but at the time, that's all I could ask. And then I auditioned and I waited, and then the picking process. But after I auditioned at University of Redlands, I met Bill Schlitt. He wasn't there for my APU audition, but he was, I guess, impressed that I had taught myself, and he said, would you be interested in going to the Idlewild Summer Arts Camp Festival thing in Idlewild? And I was like, I don't know. That sounds like really difficult, and I could barely read music. And he goes, no, I think this is what you need to do. Um, and so we kind of played around with the idea, and summer had rolled around. This was right before I started school. And I had chosen APU at that point, and he's the teacher there. And he goes, so are you going to do Idlewild? And I was like, I guess. So I went there, and it was probably the best tool that I had to prepare me for school, because I stayed there for 4 weeks. So it was 2 back-to-back 2-week sessions. And it's basically college in a nutshell for a performance major, right? It's you practice all day with tiny little breaks to learn some stuff, but you basically just practice for your performance that's coming up. And it was basically just like it was college minus academic classes.
Right.
um so it was transitioning from there to school was so seamless, especially because I only had like a week in between. It was just
Okay.
it was the same thing, because it was there was a lot of APU teachers that were there. Some of my percussionist friends that also I got to learn with at APU were at this thing as well, so it was just like a really good transition. If I didn't have his guidance over that summer, I think it would have been a big shock, going from,
Okay.
playing at lunchtime to,
To
practicing 8 hours a day or whatever it is.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. What were some, because you studied also not only percussion, but you were also a high achiever and you studied composition, right?
Yeah, I did.
So what stemmed that? What was that about? How did you come up to, how did you decide, oh, I want to study composition?
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to high school. I had an amazing band director. His name's Fred Steiner. He's since left my high school, but he uh he was very adamant on, if you're interested in this, pursue it. And I was just getting into like band music at the time, and I was like, oh, there's so much here. And we had a student teacher, his name was Joe Reeder, and he, for like my birthday or whatever, he gave me a USB stick with like 20 or 30 gigs of band music on it. And it was just like my brain had opened up, and I was like, oh, I want to write a band piece. And so I did. And it was awful, as all things are when you just start. But I looked back on it and I was like, oh, there's some interesting ideas here. Although I'm pretty sure I just like ripped off most of John Mackey's stuff. But it's like that's never going to see the light of day, so we're just going to leave it there. So I did that, and I just fell in love with like sitting there and writing down notes on my computer. It felt so legit. So when I was at APU, I knew I was going to take comp classes at some point. And then I was looking at all like the options, and I'm like, well, everything I want to take is basically just like for the degree, so I might as well just do the 2 or 3 extra classes I don't want to take and get the degree with it, you know. And so I decided to do that, which was a difficult choice, especially for, mental health. that it was just a lot of classes because there wasn't much crossover between the two, except for like theory and the ear training classes. There wasn't much where I could double dip.
Right.
So at the end of my freshman year, I decided, okay, if I'm just going to take these classes, I might as well push myself a little further and go for the degree. So I did that and I submitted the paperwork. And I didn't get like, nobody told me if it was approved or not. You know how the system works. It's like you never really know what you've done or what's been approved or who's signed what. And no one told me that my degree was actually approved until like second semester senior year. So I totally could have done all of that for nothing. It was like, excuse me, what? Why didn't I hear about this? Right, but office people, bless their hearts. I wouldn't want that job.
That's a tough job. Being an office worker is tough.
Yeah.
So now that you did your undergraduate degree, what was, looking back now, what was one of those, I guess, highlight performances that you had? Something that kind of stuck out to you as being, man, this was a really good performance I gave, or that we
Yeah.
gave.
I mean, there's so many, I was thinking about that the other day. Every couple of months, I go back and look at whatever is on YouTube or is on my Facebook page. And I'm like, oh, that was amazing. I think I've said this before. I don't know if you were there when I said this. I was a senior and I said, I think the best I've ever played was at when the wind ensemble went to Casmic. And I was just, we were all there and we knew that the sound check was probably the worst we've ever played. And then the performance was probably the best the group has ever played together. And it was just a special experience. And for me personally, missing notes that you haven't missed before is a big deal, because it's like, why? I've practiced for this very moment. But I remember sitting through and I could count how many notes I missed on two hands. And for an hour of music, that was a big deal for me, especially for how difficult that music was. We did music for Prague. We did Maslenka's Requiem, which the marimba part for that is so hard. It's like you have 3 beats to go from the very top of the 5 octave to the very bottom, and then you have like 1 beat to get back to the top. And I wore my Fitbit during the concert, and I looked down at it for like a half second. My heartbeat was at like 185, and I was like,
Oh, wow.
oh, I was like just totally, in the moment. So that was a really special experience. All 3 of my recitals were like a great time, even though I've kind of like blocked it out in my psyche because, all
I
the
think we all do.
preparation, all
Yeah.
that preparation. And then you look back on it in a video and you're like, oh, that's what happened, all 3 of those were just like a really great time. And I got to play with my friends who not only are my friends, but some of the greatest musicians I've ever known. And those were just special that I could share that with the people that I love. And granted, they weren't the best performances, but they were probably the most meaningful because it was just, an actual step-by-step growth in how I've, come as a musician year by year, seeing the progress and like technique and musicianship. It was just really special.
In what ways did APU prepare you for real world, for life after college, for grad school?
I mean, I'm an exception to the rule, right? Because I stayed at the same school for grad school, and that's on me. I totally didn't even think about it till like it was like 2 months before I graduated, and I was like, oh yeah, I kind of want to do grad school. Can I stay here? And they're like, oh yeah, I guess so. Um, but I think the biggest thing that APU did was having a relationship with your professors, with your mentors, because I got so many gigs from my teachers, and I don't know if that's a thing at most schools. I'm sure it is, but I only know my school. Um, and the first paid gig I ever got was from Professor Russell, the conductor of our symphony. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is real. I'm being paid to play some music, and it was like, it was a pretty good paycheck for how little I actually had to play, but it just meant the world to me that somebody, believed in me enough to give that opportunity where it's like, you're the outside hire, you're the one that we're expecting to come in with that higher echelon of knowledge. And from there, I kind of um, started branching out more, not only with professors, but with friends, and taking that step into like the gig life, as people call it. Um, and experiencing what being a professional musician is. I don't think, if that hadn't have happened, I doubt I would be as secure with my choice right now, that I did the right thing with music and everything. Because it was, even though it was like, oh, I'm your teacher, here's a gig, it's like your mom telling you, oh, I'm giving you this important job to do. It's like they kind of, it's whatever. But even though it was sort of, I know you can do this, I'm your teacher, you're still learning, it was, they were real, performances, real gigs with real professional musicians also. So it was sort of that step out into a job, instead of I'm a student. At that point in time, for however long the gig lasts, for the rehearsal cycles, I was a professional. And that made the biggest difference in my confidence level, that I can do this.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's one of the choices I chose. APU was the association with, it's in the LA area.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the professors that teach at APU also are working musicians in the LA area
Right.
and had those connections. And so it was like, oh, this is going to be a networking opportunity for me to be
Definitely.
able to, to be able to find, gigs um, through the networking I did at APU. And, that was something that was important to me. And I'm, was able to do, have been able to do since I've been there.
Right.
And one of the choices why I chose an LA school, or a school in the LA area, as opposed to like some, going back to like Orange County or going somewhere different, that's maybe not as populated, or where the music scene isn't as big. So, looking back at your undergrad, would there have been something you would have done differently? Maybe a course, or attitude towards a certain topic, maybe, that you would have considered now that, now that we've been out of it, and where we currently.
Yeah. I mean, I think you said attitude, and that was a big thing, because even though I started at APU, I did not want to be there one bit. I was like, this isn't, like my high school was a very competitive high school. And I think in my graduating class, there were like 30 some odd kids going to UC Berkeley. And so it was all about the big names. And I felt embarrassed. Like, I was like, nobody's ever heard of this place, And so I started there, and I was like, I don't think I fit in. I don't really want to be here. Um, and it wasn't until probably a year in that I realized, you make the best of every situation, and that's what you'll get out of it. And I wish I could have that first year back, where I was like, this is lame, this isn't a real school, blah blah blah. It's because my attitude toward that has changed completely. It's night and day. um I realized I was meant to be there, and there's more to that than just about schools, right? But everybody in that school has truly become my family for life. So it's just, even though it may not be what you want, it's where you're supposed to be. And if it's not, you won't be there for so long, and that whole first year I was fighting, fitting in, because I'm not going to be here longer. I'm going to transfer. I remember, she's like, even when I started that first month or two, I was already looking at audition material for other schools. I'm like, I don't want to be here. This isn't for me. Um, Before I even had classes start, I didn't give it a chance, Um, so it was soon after. I was pretty tired of being miserable, and I was like, just settle in. And once you make the best of what you got, I mean, the world's your oyster, as they say. I got all those opportunities that I wanted from wherever, USC, UCLA, those big schools. But obviously at the time, I didn't even know how to play my instrument. So I needed to learn how to do that before I could think about, I was very vain in when I started school, because I thought, I'm not going to get the best education if I'm not at the best school. But I got the best education for me, because that was the right place for me. So I totally wish I could go back and like change my attitude, because freshman year Erin was not happy. And it's like I turned down so many good opportunities for friendships, for opportunities, and it was just like, oh, man. So just being content with where you are. If you're not meant to be there, you won't be there for very long, and it's like you have the choice to make the choice that you want. um and I think I hate change, so I should have realized once I started I wasn't going to change anything. I was going to see it through. So
Right.
if I had realized that earlier, I think that first year of learning my instruments and all of that, I could have been compounded further my expertise level and all that stuff. So yeah, that was, if I could change anything, it would definitely be my attitude. Yeah, big thing.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good one. That's a good one. Um, that happens. I could tell you my stories about my formative years in undergrad. And I had the same attitude. I was like more towards my end, more towards the middle years, and then I realized, well, I'm not going to change anything, and this is the card I was dealt, and so you make
Right.
the most of that situation. So
And then
seeing,
you end up loving it, and it's like you wouldn't change it for the world.
yeah, to a certain degree, I was bitter about it for some time, and then I've come to accept that's what it was,
Mhm.
and it prepared me in a way for what I do today. And so it's like, oh,
Right.
I'm grateful that I had that opportunity. you know I didn't understand it at the time, but it happened for that reason. There was a reason behind it. So
Hindsight is so hard.
right.
It's like,
Yeah.
darn.
So what would you say, what are some a thought that you had or two about someone who wanted to study percussion, they wanted to major in percussion in their undergrad years? What's a piece of advice you could give them?
Oh, I mean, so obviously this is all opinion from what I've learned.
Sure.
I was big in marching band, right? I did drum corps, I did WGI. So it was sort of, and that's not to say that that's bad, because I think most concert percussionists, that's pretty much how they start, is especially in America, we start through band, right? That's the only chance you're going to get to play the marimba, the xylophone, the bass drum, all those rack players. You're the rudiments in the battery. That's the only way you're going to get the start. Nobody, well, nobody that I know started as a concert percussionist. Pretty much every percussionist I know started as like a marching band person, which is fine. I love band, I love it. But if you want to study concert percussion, at least from my own experience, getting rid of those marching habits helps so much, because it's like you're not going to dut time, and Mahler, that's not going to be a thing. You're not going to like prep your mallets for, a marimba solo. Um, so getting rid of those habits, it's hard to live that double life, and especially as an undergrad, at least if you're transitioning straight from high school, you still have that opportunity to join drum corps until you're 21. And I wasn't 21 until my senior year. So I totally could have done that. Granted, it's like super expensive, but that double life, it's very challenging to balance between, concert repertoire and marching skills, because it's a totally different tool set. um, so all I wanted to do was study concert percussion. So I kind of threw out all that, extra stuff. And I'm not saying that it wasn't important, but there's certain attitudes about marching that don't really translate in the concert world. So that's one thing I would say. If you're starting out on percussion and you want to major in it, practice smart. Practice hard, but also practice smart, because there's certain things, like building up marimba chops. You get those really bad blisters on your fingers, and it makes it really hard to practice anything else if all you can think about is like, my hands are on fire. Um, so try and plan out your practicing, so that if you're going to do something that's extra strenuous, maybe save it till the end, so that you don't ruin, a good practice session. And that depends on how much time you've got, how many instruments you have. At that point, I had nothing, so I was like playing timpani on pillows. So, and
Okay.
then make the best of what you've got. Playing timpani on the pillows prepared me fine. Even though I wasn't using my feet to change notes, I was like getting it in my hands, and it totally worked. And I think maybe the last thing would be play a lot of repertoire. Always branch out,
Like, so
and find,
expand.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, branch out and find like all these little gems. There's pieces that I have never wanted to play, and then I start playing it, and I'm like, this doesn't sound good, or it doesn't feel right in my hands. And then I give it a little time, and then you kind of fall in love with it. But it just expands your rep so much, and especially for percussion, it's sort of a limited field, right? Percussion, concert percussion really only started being like a solo thing maybe the early 20th century, maybe very late 19th century, or yeah, 19th century. Um, so our repertoire doesn't go back as far. And early 20th century percussion works are really weird. They're not for everybody, but it gets you, that sort of look into the beginnings of the instruments, how they were made back then would influence how you play differently. Um, so it's just changing your perspective on a lot of that, because I know as a concert percussionist, especially if I'm doing solo rep, I want to play Ivan Trevino, all his cool tonal stuff. I want to play anything that comes with an electronic track, because it sounds good, it's pleasing to the ear. But there's so much more out there that if you give it a chance, even if you don't like how it sounds, it improves your technique tenfold. I mean, there's stuff that I've played where I never enjoyed it, but afterwards I was grateful that I did it, because it teaches you how to play a quintuplet over a triplet or whatever. And that doesn't come up often, but now I know how to do it.
Right, you've experienced it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what has been your grad experience like? That sounds awkward saying that, but what is grad
Right.
school like?
Oh my
It's a better
gosh.
way.
Grad school's a beast. But I've gleaned more from it than I could have ever asked for.
Did your
It
attitude change? Like, meaning the work that you were putting in during your undergrad, did that increase when you went to grad school, or you kind of had? How did that work out?
Oh, it's so weird, right? Because I'm the exception to the rule in the case that I did stay at the same school that I did undergrad at. So a lot of it was so similar. But I think the biggest difference was, again, like a change in attitude. Instead of being a follower, I was expected to be a leader, right? And especially as you know, at APU, the professors expect a lot from the grad students to set an example for the undergrads to match in style, to match in leadership, blah blah blah. But oh my gosh, it's just the it's weird because coming from a double degree, there was so much work that it's just like work for the sake of work. And I was doing 2 degrees, so it was just like my brain was split in 5 different quadrants, 5 and quad, whatever. Numbers aren't my thing. I'm a percussionist. Well, numbers should be my thing. Anyway,
Right. As long as if
um,
you can count to four, then you're okay.
I know 5. That's just 4 plus 1. That's all I need. Um, it was it was just really an interesting switch. It was weird having the same professors that I've had in undergrad, but then just like in a totally different light, you're more on the same level in some aspects, at least. So the switch wasn't necessarily a hard one because it was the same community. I have the same teachers, the same friends. But it was odd that like now my friends that are in undergrad, I never see. I don't have classes with because I'm on that like extra level of whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I don't think I imagined how much more I would get, not necessarily from what I'm studying, but like just life teachings, goals. It's just there's so much more to it to take away, and that attitude totally has changed. Like I'm open to learning whatever it is, within reason. It's just my mind is open and I'll take it up like a sponge. If I don't need it later, I'll get rid of it. So
Sure.
there's that.
Yeah. And the preparation that you've done, from both undergrad and grad school, has prepared you,
Mm,
doing things outside of that. Like you're doing a number of different projects right now.
yeah.
You've written and arranged your own music,
Oh
some
yeah.
of it which we've performed.
We have.
Didn't you arrange the didn't we do your arrangement, or we did some of your edits from the last concert, the Copeland? The
Oh yeah. That's so lame. It's because I I don't know what happened. So I saw, right. So it was Copeland's A Promise of Living,
Right.
The Promise, A Promise, whatever. Articles, who cares? But then the recording that I'd been listening to had like this flute part that wasn't in the edition that we used, but I'm pretty sure the video that I was listening to was using the same arrangement. So I'm like, what the heck? So I just like wrote it in. I'm like, here, play this because it sounds good, you know, and it sounded so much better. I'm not saying that's a me thing, but I was just like so confused. Why wasn't this in the arrangement, you know? Yeah, that
Sure.
was fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you wrote a march recently.
Oh my goodness. I totally forgot about that. I totally forgot I did that. And then the other day I listened back and I was like, that feels like years ago. That
It
just
was like
goes to show.
a couple of months ago.
I know. It's so
Yeah.
weird.
But that's a talent, that's a skill that you now have that you
Right.
can go and market, you know, and then you have done that. You've written music that's been published. So you're a
Yeah.
published composer. You want to talk
Oh
a little bit
yeah.
about that?
Yeah, that was an interesting experience. So the one piece the one piece that I've got published right now, it's called Satisfraction. It's for marimba trio. I had wanted to call it marimba trio, you know, in old school fashion, and the publisher goes, it's too vague. And I was like, excuse me. So I keep a list, you know, back in my guitar days, I kept a list of all the things I could name songs or albums. I just went on that list and picked a random one. Satisfaction was the only one that I was like, okay. So the name means nothing if anybody ever wants to
Are
know.
is there any subdivisions in there? Satisfaction.
Well, I mean, there is like a weird 5/8, 9/8 section or something, but I was like, I can't just call it satisfaction because I find no satisfaction in it whatsoever. But I mean, I wrote that piece while I was still in high school. I talked about how I took music theory AP and we were learning about seventh chords. And I was like, I'm pretty sure my piano friends talked about this thing called inversions. So I basically just took, I think it's like an E7 chord and I inverted it. Well, I didn't invert it. I just put like the seventh in a weird place. But I was like, oh, I kind of messed around with something. I was like, oh, that sounds good. And then so I originally wrote it and I'm like, this could be a piano solo. And then I'm like, no self-respecting pianist would ever play something as easy as this. So then I'm like, maybe I'll make it like a piano duet. So I wrote another part and I was like, no, this is still too simple. And I was like, oh, right. I'm a percussionist. Why don't I write this for marimbas? So I did.
Of
And then I
course.
just added a third part and I was like, yeah, we'll just figure this out. It was really a lot of just button pushing. And I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. I had no idea what was going on. And then I submitted that while I was a freshman at APU. And then I got the notice in, oh gosh, maybe like early 2016 that they were going to accept it. I had sent that to 4 different publishers and I had to wait a very long time for the no's. So I was like, oh gosh, okay. Like obviously I understand, you know, the self-confidence at that point was very low. So I was like, of course you wouldn't take it. But then I found my publisher, which is Tap Space Publications, and they were like, yeah, of course, this is great. And I was like, oh, cool. You know, so
So much
I
excitement
I
there.
know. I was like, fantastic. I kid you not. I was like bouncing off the walls. I was so excited when I got I pretty much went into everybody's office. I was like, oh my gosh, I got published, blah, blah, blah. Um, yeah, and it's been great. We premiered it at APU.
Okay.
But then since then, it was just recorded for the first time by the Chandler Gilbert Community College in Arizona with Josh Gotry, who's like an amazing percussion composer, percussionist. He's fantastic. He's a great guy. Um, they were going to play it at UCLA and it didn't work out. They were going to do like an all women's thing. And it made like the state list, I think in like Missouri and Indiana or something for percussionists, which is fantastic. But I think that experience has really compounded my, you know, self-love, you know, like I can do this, you know. um, I don't compose much anymore. I had a conversation with a buddy the other day, and I was telling him about some projects that I'm doing now that I'd like to get published. But I was like, I don't think composition is my thing. I think arranging and orchestrating is my thing. And especially in the percussion repertoire, there's so many fantastic composers writing stuff that I could never even imagine writing. Um, And I was telling him, I think my stance in the percussion repertoire is more giving the chance to play other standard repertoire for percussionists, right? We're not going to get to play Shostakovich. We're not going to get to play Rachmaninoff because that's just not our instrument, or even like the Bach cello suites. There's arrangements for every instrument of that, but there's not a lot of arrangements of other standard rep for percussion instruments. Like we're not going to get to know how those phrases work, or the timbres, the different chord tones, like how it was written. So I've sort of taken it on myself to give that standard rep to the percussion community, and I think that's where I'm going to go from here on out with my writing. I mean, if I ever get inspired to like compose, maybe, but like I just don't even think my knowledge of that could go where, the rep needs it to be.
Okay, fair. That's fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So I want to ask you a little bit of advice on for non-percussion playing directors
Right.
like myself. What are some things that we could do? Like, what's a good size of snare sticks that we should be looking at for our students to use?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is spend the hours learning what you expect your students to know.
Okay.
I being isolated because you can't get direction other than like be better. It doesn't help anybody, and I think it compounds the director's knowledge so much just to know that extra little bit about percussion, because if we're expected to know it, so should you, especially if you're the one guiding, if you're the one leading. So as far as sticks go, the probably the best general stick that you can buy that's relatively cheap is the Vic Firth SD1s. It's a great
Okay.
concert stick. I think it's hickory. I don't know. I can't remember. You know, it's a fantastic sounding stick that like basic.
Next time we have you, you're gonna have to know the formula, how much of what they
Oh my
put into
gosh.
it, how much
No, no,
wood, what
no.
kind of wood.
I mean, I could look, but that'd be
No,
cheating.
it's
I just need to like click on it and hear how it sounds. I mean, for any stick or mallet, there's basically, 3 or 4 main factors. It's how it feels in the hands, so that's personal preference. Um, the tone that you want and the tone that it provides, and then the bead type, which gives attack. So that's why there's so many different types of sticks out there. It's okay, the comfort factor in the player's hand, the type of wood, the density gives the type of tone, and then there's like a million and one different bead types, and the beads the part at the end of the stick, where there's some, my favorite are just like the ball, the rounded ones. Then there's the teardrop shape. There's like this weird ovular one where it's sort of flat, and those are all just to give different types of attack for different drums. Like using thicker sticks is usually better on tom because it gives more tone. But I mean, my favorite stick, I've used the same pair for the last 6 years. Fantastic build quality. It's they're pretty fancy though. I think they're like $50. Um, it's the Cooperman's Graham C. Johns. They're like, first of all, they look so fancy. And like the
okay.
name is engraved and everything. But the hand feel is fantastic. It's my favorite all-around stick. I think I've used it in every recital I've played. I've pretty much used it on every gig if I need to play snare drum. It's a good all-around stick, but it's a fantastic concert snare stick. I mean, it's just pretty. It's pretty to look at. So why wouldn't you
It's
want it?
pretty, there you go. That's
That's
always
all you need.
the best rationale.
Yeah.
So for a school setting, you would say the Vic Firth, the
Yeah.
SD1s.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, pretty much anything school related, if you go Vic Firth, you can't go wrong. I mean,
Okay.
they they know what they're doing. I mean, Vic himself, bless his soul. Um, it's just a fantastic company, and everything is quality. I've never had a Vic Firth thing go bad. Like I have chime mallets that are just like the bee's knees. And
Okay.
you whack the hell out of them, but it's like that's the whole point. It's so they make it for that specific reason. They're gonna last and they sound great. So
Okay. And if somebody were to, I guess, they wanted to kind of start their own, compile their own collection
mhm.
of percussion sticks, what would be like the next best thing after getting like an SD1? Is that just
Yeah.
personal preference at that point, or is
I
there?
think it is personal
Okay.
preference, and it's also kind of what equipment you will be playing on or that you have, because certain sticks and mallets make certain instruments sing better than others. Sometimes my Coopermans, they just don't work. They sound too thin on like a field drum, so you have to have a bigger stick. I think the most important part is like for you having something you're comfortable with, because I'd rather suffer a little bit of sound quality if I know I can play the part correctly with my sticks. And sometimes I pick up my sticks and it just feels completely wrong. And I use the grossest pair that the school has and it's just right. So it's just kind of what you're confident with. Yeah. So at that point, it's preference in your instrument. Like I love my Coopermans, but I also love my SD1s. Like I sometimes I don't even know what I'm using and I'm like using two different sticks and it's like fantastic. So I mean, never do that. But and same thing goes for all the extra stuff. Like I just got a brand new triangle and I had a pair of beaters and I hated it. So I just got a new set of beaters and it's about the weight, it's about the hand feel. With marimba mallets, I mean, gosh, that is such a wide variety. We in the marimba world, there's so much stuff. Basically, there's the difference between birch and rattan, and rattan is like the pliable, bouncy, sort of bamboo-like material, and birch is basically straight with just a little bit of bounce. And again, I always use birch because it just feels better in my hands. My hands get sweaty when I play, which isn't good, which means I'm clenching the fingers. But my friend who just had his master's recital, he always uses rattan and I can't stand it. So it's just like it's really personal preference and what makes the instrument sing. Like I have certain mallets that I love, but on my marimba, it does nothing. So it's like great.
So when you're talking about the birch and the rattan, you're talking about the handles that you
Yeah,
hold.
yeah. So that's the handle of the
Okay.
mallet.
So okay, and then that's one element, and then the actual part that you strike the instrument with,
Yeah,
that can
like
be.
that's so many different things. So like the biggest thing with mallets, and this goes for all mallet percussion as well as timpani, there's two main differences where it's the core size and material, and then the yarn or the felt that it's wrapped in. So it's like I think with uh most mallet instrument mallets, it's or I should say melodic percussion, it's a rubber core. Well, I shouldn't say. I don't know for sure. There's a lot of different cores. So it's the size of the core, the material of the core, which gives it its bounce, but also how much yarn it's wrapped in. And obviously, there's like 1,000 different color combinations, and sometimes it's just nice to buy pretty mallets because why not? But the type of yarn it's wrapped in, how much yarn it's wrapped in, the less yarn, the more articulation, the more yarn, the less articulation. So you'd use heavily wrapped mallets on the lower end of an instrument versus, on the higher end, you want less so you can produce more articulation because there's less overtones on the upper side of the instrument. But again, it's like sometimes composers want the fluffy sound on the high end of the instrument. So it's like that's where knowing performance practice and all that comes in, where we don't have that for percussion. But yeah, I mean, I always use birch. I don't think I own a single pair of rattan mallets except for like bells or xylophone. Um, but that's like personal preference. Like rattan is a lot thicker in the hand, and I don't know what it is with my hands, but I just can't get rattan mallets to fit in my hand. So I always use birch. It's so much personal preference.
Okay. And then having a variety of different mallets that have the different core sizes and then the different amount of yarn that it's wrapped in is important because.
You don't know what you're going to come across.
Right. And then most of the time it's conduct your preference, right? They
Yeah.
want something. I'm not hearing that marimba line cut through, so I want
Yeah.
this
I
mallet
mean,
over what you're currently using, or
yeah.
too
And
much and I want it on the opposite side.
yeah, and ensemble playing, it's a big thing. We're lucky at APU that the school provides stuff, but at most schools and conservatories, you need to provide your own mallets. And sometimes, even if the school does provide equipment, having your own it's like extra, colors if you're doing a painting. It's just extra stuff that you may not know that you need, but it's nice to have. I was very lucky where I think it was between my sophomore and junior year, where I was just perusing eBay, which I never do. And I found this guy selling, I think it was like 200 pairs of mallets for like $100. And I jumped on that. I stayed up till like 2 a.m. to get the bid. It was like $120 for 200 pairs of mallets. I'm like, that's upwards of like 50K of equipment. Granted, he was a smoker and it smelled disgusting when it got here because it was like sitting in a box. I'm like, I have all this stuff that I would never have bought, so it was just on the off chance that like, oh my gosh, like the stars have aligned.
Yeah, it's an opportunity you can't pass up.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I guess with that, that's still personal preference when it comes to like mallets. So
Mhm.
I guess there's any like you have like two default, is there defaults in any way? Like you have
Yeah.
one with one certain type of core with less amount of yarn, and then the one with the same type of core but with more yarn?
Yeah. So
How would
like
you manage that?
there's all the different companies and there's more popping up like every couple of months. My go-to mallets are Encore mallets. And of course there's Vic Firth concert mallets. There's a new company, Dragonfly Percussion. They're coming out with some crazy stuff. Innovative Percussion, some people like them. That I feel like that's more of a marching company. The 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 creme de la creme of marimba vibe mallets right now is Marimba One, where they actually make those nice 5-octave marimbas. But most companies have a general mallet where they use it for like all-purpose playing. Um, and they're usually fantastic. Like they do play on the low end. It's a little, you know, it's a little muddy. And then they do play on the high end. And again, it's a little muddy, but
That's
it's
middle
like,
of the road.
yeah. So it's like you
Okay.
get all the you can get all the notes, but maybe you can't make them sing like you can with other mallets. But so my go-to is Encore, and they're a fantastic company that supports percussionists like nuts. So I literally pretty much the only mallet that I ever use on my marimba are the Encore general mallets, and it's like they're so middle of the line, but they sound great on my marimba. But then all these different companies have like artist series where the artist usually is a marimba soloist. They get to pick the size and the shape of the core, how it's wrapped. And so like my next go-to is still from Encore, but it's the Nancy Zeltman's, and she's a fantastic percussionist. But it's like um it's wrapped differently where it's instead of it just being a ball, it's sort of flat on the sides. So since it's flat on the sides and sort of curved at the top, you get more articulation, but also if you're like doing rolls or something, you get to like move your arms up and use the edge of the mallet, and it's a smoother roll than using the articulate side. And it's just like there's like 9 different kinds of those, and it's like, and then one other thing to know is that there's something called a graduated set where they send you like one of the softest, one of the medium soft, a medium hard, and a hard. And you usually for solo playing, if you have a piece that's like the entire span of the instrument, you want to use a graduated set of mallets so that when you're on the low end and you're using that low, soft, puffy mallet, you get the low end to sing. But when you're at the high end, you want those harder mallets. So, you know, that's also player preference if you want to use the same set of 4 or 2, or if you want to use different mallets within your grip. I found it's odd. It's like an odd feeling to know that like your left hand is heavier than your right hand because there's more yarn, but it just depends on the piece. Like so if you're doing one-handed rolls for like 5 minutes on one hand, you don't want like those hard mallets. So you use soft mallets on that hand and then you use hard mallets on the other hand. So it is player preference.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Very, very cool. Now, as we're winding down
Mm.
our time today, what's one, I guess, funny performance story that you have?
Oh gosh. I mean, there's so many. Pretty much something happens every time I perform. But also you find the fun in it. Um, oh, I mean, I've got like just short ones off the top of my head. There's this percussion piece called Martian Tribes where there's like a lot of dancing or there's body movement involved in it. And we played it a couple years ago at APU, and my shoes were too big and they kept falling off as I was like dancing around the stage. And it was just like the most aggravating thing I could ever think of, because you're like shuffling from one end of the marimba and like running down the other, and my shoes were falling off. Or there's the time we were doing a symphony concert and there were so many people in Munson, it's a tiny stage, where we needed to wait off stage, but the strings were on that side with the door. So we had to wait, four of us stuffed behind the organ, and it just like in the middle of a concert, it was just so awkward. Or there was the time when I was in UCO and I forgot we had like matching gowns or whatever, and I forgot mine. So instead of being a normal human and just wearing like regular concert black, I like made this makeshift gown where I had like this long flowy skirt made out of like chiffon, which is see-through. And then I put like a short dress on top of that, which was like, it was like the material of a towel, so it wasn't see-through. And then I put a long sleeve shirt on top of that, and it was just the most awkward looking thing you've ever seen in your life. And I don't know why I didn't think just to wear like normal concert black, but I'm like, no, I gotta wear a gown like everybody else. It was just like the worst.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
That's good. That's a good one. Um, Best piece of advice you received?
Oh gosh. I mean, I think, going to Dr. Burdett, he said nothing you've ever done will ever be good enough again. And that's good for practicing, for, just like life goals. You just don't settle, oh, I've done it better. It's like, no, you got to do it as good as your best all the time. That's not necessarily like pushing yourself 100% of the time, like not giving yourself any breaks, but knowing that you've done the best that you can do. So don't revert back to your old ways. It's just like a huge thing.
Okay, that's good. That's good advice. One piece that or one piece that you would like to conduct in the future when we get back to in person and being together.
I just bought the score to Morton Gould's Santa Fe Saga,
Okay.
which is like, not enough people know about this piece. It is a gold mine, not only like for a conductor, but for players. There's so many different styles within it. Anything Ron Nelson. I would love to do uh Pebble Beach Sojourn, but there's no scores to that anymore, so sad face. I would love to do Passacaglia homage on Bach. That's like the most epic music I've ever heard in my life. It's just the horns and like the massive percussion. Oh my gosh. I was listening to it yesterday and I like got the chills. And then I listened to it again and I got the chills again. It's
Oh
just
yeah.
fantastic writing.
You
Yeah.
gonna analyze it?
No, I don't think I will.
Okay.
Oh.
And finally, your New Year's plans. We're entering a new year. What plans do you got?
I plan to not look at my screen for 15 hours a day. So hopefully I can let my computer rest in peace. My eyeballs have melted out of my skull from like all the school time, all the extra project time, all the work. It's just like, I'm so done. Um, I'd like to play my Nintendo Switch. I got some new games that I'd
Okay.
like to enjoy for once, a little free time. Do a little arranging, a little composing. No composing, just arranging. I'd like to play my marimba some more. I didn't get to do that enough. And just like be lazy with my dogs. That'd be fantastic.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You can never go wrong with dogs.
No.
Yeah. How many percussion instruments do you own by chance? 'Cause I remember you told me the other day you bought a cowbell.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah, I just did a socially distant concert where there was some stuff that I didn't have. I'm like, it's an investment. So I have a 4-octave Deegan Model 50 marimba, which was actually my great grandfather's, which is like kind of insane.
Yeah.
Because nobody in my family is musical, so that's nuts. I have 2 snare drums that I built. I have one piccolo and then one 5.5 by 14. I've got a whole bunch of shakers. Lord knows I have too many shakers. I've set up bongos. I bought that cowbell. I have a kalimba. I have a concert tambourine, a black swamp tambourine. I bought a triangle, a Sabian triangle. It's the prettiest thing you've ever seen. So it's like a lot of little things, except the marimba. That's probably like my prized possession.
No timpani?
No
No bass
timps,
drum?
no bass drum. No, there's not enough space, or my neighbors would kill me.
What did we play in the fall? Um, Castanets. You bought a pair
Oh
of
yeah,
castanets?
I bought a pair of castanets. Oh my gosh, those are so expensive. I can't believe that was a year ago.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh,
that
I'm
was.
probably never gonna play those again either, which is so sad.
Oh, we'll find something.
Yo, we'll find something.
We'll find something.
Oh my gosh, those are nice castanets. I don't even know where those are at this point.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, I redid my closet, so it's basically like a little percussion like storage unit. But
Already.
yeah, I still don't know where anything is.
Huh.
Yeah, figures.
Life be that way sometimes.
It does indeed.
Great. Well, Erin, thank you so much for being a part of today's podcast. Really appreciate having you on and sharing your musical story and some percussion tips that non-percussion band directors can use.
Anybody could use that knowledge.
Right. So thank you for being on the show. Hope we can have you on again.
Much appreciated.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Yeah. So happy New Year to you. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.